Beep, 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 beep. Beep, 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 beep.
Nowadays, everybody want to talk like they got something to say, but nothing comes out when they move their lips. Just a bunch of gibberish. You motherfuckers act like they forgot about Bob.
Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly, where I'm going to take you on a fantastic, fun-filled journey through the otherwise bland world of news and analysis.
It's still bland.
Last week, I speculated, I guessed, I wondered, hey, you know what, maybe there's going to be a developer Q&A sometime this week to go over what's going to happen in patch 8.2, and well, as usual, I was wrong. Instead, this week we had a series of interviews starring both Ian Hazzikostas and his ponytailed daddy, J. Allen Brack. Later in the show, I'm going to give a few highlights and provide some food for thought. But, well, in the meantime, let's talk about what else happened this week. As a quick reminder, Warlords of Draenor Time Walking is debuting for the first time this week. If you have 10,000 of those Time Warped badges, you too can have some awesome looking mounts. Now that another Time Walking event is in the rotation, the next time you see WoD Time Walking will be in September.
Oh, thank goodness.
So don't slack off too much. Now let's do this week's quote of the week. This time we have...
Wait, you just jumped right in. What's this quote of the week?
Well, I figured I'd do a new thing, for fun.
And comments.
And comments. So this is something I'm going to try out really quick. This is the quote of the week, where I'm going to pick out a statement that, I don't know, that I found interesting, or maybe ludicrous, or well thought out. Okay, it's just ludicrous. But here's a quote that comes from Wowhead, referring to World of Warcraft Classic. I spent 20 minutes collecting bandanas from Defias mobs in Elwyn, and I loved every minute of it. Why? They weren't guaranteed drops. I had to be quick on tapping mobs, and the time it took to run between quest nodes made me pay real close attention to what I was doing. That's far better gameplay than 815.
What?
Maybe that should be the name of the new segment.
What?
Okay, never mind, that's just awful. Okay, let's try to understand what's being said here. So, the person here, I'm going to assume that it's a male, he was doing a farm quest to get bandanas. I guess to be precise, he was referring to this quest, and he needs 6 bandanas. 20 minutes, 6 bandanas. Okay. He said, I had to be quick on tapping mobs, and the time it took to run between quest nodes made me pay real close attention to what I was doing. So it sounds like, between the drop rate and congestion and mob tapping rules, he had to work pretty hard to find a place to farm where there were fewer players. So let me restate that. He made efforts to avoid other players doing the same thing that he was doing, and he loved every minute of it. Okay, now I don't have a clue what this means for this to be so-called better gameplay than patch 815. I mean, is he trying to compare this farming of bandanas to, sucking up the souls of dead Naga thanks to a evil magic talking dagger? Is this person trying to make an argument that it's more compelling gameplay to encourage the isolation of players and make them compete for kills? Because I bet you there are at least a couple people that are willing to say, well, shucks, this is a really contrived way to prolong game time and increase monthly active users, blizz. There are WoW Classic fans out there. I get it, you love it. But what's the point of comparing what is basically the first half hour of an MMO's base game to the endgame activity of a different game's 7th expansion? I'm just trying to say that it's perfectly okay to talk about something that you love without having the need to step on something else as you do it. But I don't know, I just read this comment and I was like, what? So I just wanted to share it with you. Moving on, over on the Battle.net launcher comes yet another Call of Duty game.
This one is called Mistweaver.
No.
Morrowind.
No.
Mech Warrior.
No.
Modern Woman.
Modern Warfare is now on the launcher, so it's just a matter of time before the threads go up about, oh no, Activision is taking over the launcher, something Bobby Kotick, same old song. Assuming that Activision continues releasing COD games every year like they have been since 2005, you can soon expect your launcher to look more and more like your Steam library, but instead of games that you regret buying, you have a list of games that you don't even want to look at in the first place. I don't want to get too specific on the feedback, but hey, Battle.net people, maybe you should make it that we can hide things now. please? This week, another WoW Classic stress test happened, and by the way, there are going to be more coming. Naturally, it lured players by the thousands to enjoy some real gameplay.
Like writing names with bodies and flooding leveling zones for the lulz.
There's only so much you can do with a level cap of 10 after all, so I don't really blame anyone for just kind of dicking around. And like I said last week, the testing is for Blizzard as much as it is for the players who are logging in. Okay, definitely more so. Like in past weeks, Blizzard addressed another not bug, this time addressing combat tables, the values that determine dodge and parry percentages among other things. And just like last week, Blizzard published a post detailing their findings. It was met with the usual responses like skepticism. Now imagine a kid asking a teacher the answer to a question and then the teacher answers. The kid's not sure about the answer because they heard a different answer from the guy who lives out of his truck. The teacher says no, that is the right answer because they're the expert. The kid asks, what makes you so sure? And the teacher says they're sure because the answer's in a book. They happen to have the first edition of the book, and by the way, they're the ones who wrote the goddamn book. On the other end, Blizzard's classic WoW team is getting praise for their transparency, but not without throwing a bit of shade at the current WoW team for their lack of transparency or explanation for their design decisions. And I don't think that's a fair comparison.
It's like comparing apples to apple seeds. That's a time-gating joke.
What I mean is that when it comes to developing WoW Classic, the goal is to give the audience no surprises. WoW Classic should have the same feel as vanilla WoW, just that it's running off much more powerful hardware and graphic settings. In this case, it's totally okay for the Classic team to be very transparent in their communication because there's nothing to hide. The goal is basically to follow the blueprint that's already been provided. Today's World of Warcraft, along with pretty much any new game, movie, show, book, or well, any form of entertainment, all share the same goal, the aim to surprise the audience and to keep them compelled enough to look forward to an unknown future. With that said, the work that the WoW Classic team puts in is very hard, and it shouldn't be understated. It's just that the fact of the matter is that they don't have the burden of designing anything new. Moving on, the heroic version of the Battle for Stromgarde Warfront went up for testing, following raid testing, and during the final hours of WoW Classic stress testing, which was a great idea. There were like tens of us testing this. Woo!
Who cares about testing content you played only a few months ago when you can test content you played over a decade ago?
I did stick around for some testing, but I have some good news and some bad news. The bad news is that I don't have a good version of the Warfront testing I did. The good news is that I have the bad version, the really bad version. So here we go. This is the disastrous attempt where Blizzard accidentally, I guess in the middle of the Warfront, decided to scale us down to item level 315. I guess they meant to scale us to item level 415. And well, things went exactly as you think they would.
For the Alliance.
Right. Anyway, based on that, it looks like that's the item level heroic warfronts are being tuned for, 415. And the incentive is to complete the heroic version of this usual quest. This time it's going to award item level 425 gear, just a step under heroic item level in 8.2. And that's not bad. As for the gameplay itself, it certainly feels tougher. Number values have gone up, and random patrols are much more frequent. Just as Blizzard said, the enemy commander will march straight to your base and just wreck it if you don't take care of it. What happened in our good match is that after securing our base, the entire team went over to the lumber mill together. We took that, and then half of us went to the mine because that's when the enemy commander started marching, so the other half was left defending. Muradin Bronzebeard led the charge in this test, and he had some pretty crazy abilities. This probably illustrates how it felt fighting him with an item level of 300, but even at your usual item level, heroic warfronts don't play around. Unfortunately, even in the good match that I tested out, Muradin bugged out. When he got knocked down to 75% health, he was supposed to teleport out and probably come back to harass us again later. Instead, though, he evade bugged, and then he wouldn't budge, meaning after we captured all the objectives and knocked down the gates, there wasn't any boss for us to defeat. Even then, my impression of the Warfront is that it's still a little bit undertuned. Maybe Muradin had a lot more tricks to pull during the match, but he couldn't because he bugged out. But I would have liked to have seen more events that suddenly changed the pace, like, I don't know, like a big airstrike that suddenly disables all troop spawns, or maybe during the match we're suddenly afflicted with a debuff that, let's say it cuts everyone's HP in half, even players. So a number of us would have to break away from the battle to gather ingredients and make a cure while the rest of them just try to get by. I don't know, something to that effect. It would seem pretty cool. But it did feel more fun and hectic. We were straight up healing our commander Eitrig, and it felt kind of cool. it can be a lot cooler still. I'm just looking forward to the next expansion where maybe they'll release a new epic battleground based on the Warfront template. Moving on, Azerite traits have finally been unveiled for the Eternal Palace raid. I'm going to throw them up on screen here. Arcane Heart increases your highest stat for 15 seconds when you deal or heal 1.5 million something. So that means you need to pull 25,000 heals or damage per second if you want this proc to go off every minute. For my guild, this proc will go off every, I don't know, maybe 2 to 6 minutes. Burn.
Don't you mean rip? Nobody says burn anymore.
Loyalty to the End starts off as a pretty straightforward buff to your mastery, but this buff gets bigger depending on how many other people are using the same trait, up to 8 other people. And it doubles again after an ally with this trait dies, giving your raid its own kind of enrage mechanic, depending on how many people with this trait are still alive. Finally, Undulating Tides is a straightforward proc that deals damage and provides a damage absorb bubble when you drop below half health. So here's my standard spiel on how raid Azerite traits are just kind of okay, but they don't carry the same oomph as, let's say, the old tier set bonuses. As a tank, these traits aren't too bad, although I'm probably going to skip on that Arcane Heart. It would be cool if it went off based on damage taken too, maybe that would be neat. Having 2 or 3 stacks of the Loyal to the End trait, assuming that they even can stack, would make a pretty nice buff to your mastery. Maybe it'd be a good idea for one person on the team with the trait to just kill themselves immediately on the pull, and I think I have just the guy in mind. The story of Benthic Gear is finally coming to a close after Blizzard sent out an official preview of how the system will work. We came a pretty long way from seeing the fastest gearing system ever to possibly the slowest, and well, here we are now. This UI may look familiar from your mob or your warlords days. Benthic Armor will use this upgrade system, meaning, well, at least in my opinion, this upgrade system won't be very alt-friendly, but it is a path to pretty powerful gear, unlike any system we've seen before.
I'd rather be farming bandanas. It's much more compelling gameplay.
Unfortunately, I didn't gather enough monopearls to test, but at least my estimation is that each piece of fully upgraded gear is going to take around 2 to 3 weeks to obtain. So what do you think of that sort of pacing? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this in a comment below. In a small but not so insignificant piece of news, it's been discovered that in 8.2 you'll be able to tame 2 raid bosses, Undasta and Horadon. Horadon is the second boss of the Throne of Thunder instance, and he shouldn't be too much trouble to tame. Undasta though, that might be a bit of a challenge. Being an outdoor boss that's still regularly farmed, between that and the hype of getting another ridiculous tame is going to make this guy pretty hard to get, at least depending on the time of day. So good luck in 8.2. So like I said at the beginning of the show, there was no developer Q&A, but Blizzard was not silent. J. Allen Brack and Ian Hesychustas conducted separate interviews on Forbes and VentureBeat respectively. I'm going to give a few highlights, but I strongly encourage you to take a look at the full interviews below too. I'm going to have links to those below. According to Ian, you won't expect big class overhauls mid-expansion, that it's too much for a player to handle. This sounds like a no-duh sort of statement, but there are those among us who have been hoping for a big revamp, but according to Blizzard, it's just not reasonable. Because let's pretend that there is a huge overhaul for your favorite class here and now, 8.2. According to the Brack interview, Blizzard is comfortable with a time frame of a 2-year expansion with 3 major patches. So in approximately 15 months, we'll be in a new expansion. Speaking for myself, I only represent one of the 36 specs that are available, and I think that my spec's okay except for Ret Aura, and I'd like to think that yes, in a perfect world, Blizzard ought to fix their mistakes early on and reiterate as they go, but how much work does that end up adding? I can't give a broad, sweeping opinion about that, and well, I'd rather hear from you folks at home and elsewhere what you have to say about it. Brack also mentioned the Undying achievement and how he found that to be a lot of fun for his 10-man raid team. That was something that my guild went for at one point, although I believe I stayed out of it, or I was just a big failure at it, and they kicked me from it. I don't know. Looking back though, I think it would be cool to try and achieve a more general raid-wide achievement like that, or something to that sort of challenge, such as the Undying or the Herald of the Titans. The most important bit from Brack's interview came from his new perspective as president of Blizzard. He talked about not making it a requirement that all of Blizzard's games have to be for every one of his core fans. Now this was mostly reference to Blizzard developing for the mobile platform, but I'm reading this from a World of Warcraft perspective too. Even at the very beginning, the World of Warcraft was a very big game, but with each expansion, it's reinvented itself in small ways. Over time, it's got more and more people interested, but it's also turned off others. I'd argue that currently it's swung in that other direction a bit too much, but the release of WoW Classic 15 years later is going to be that effort at swinging the pendulum back. From the Ian interview, the most important tidbit from that, unfortunately it's not a release date from 8.2, but what's just as important, the gap between the 8.2 patch launch and Season 3 beginning. There was a lot of salt over how long it took for 8.1 to lead to Season 2, and having a 2-part survival guide was pretty ridiculous. Ian says that it's probably possible to fly before the raid opens, meaning that Season 2 can start as soon as, 2 weeks after the patch. And I have a reputation guide coming next week. Can I make it so that you can fly before the raid opens? Challenge accepted.
That meme is so dead.
Really? Man. So that's going to wrap things up for the day. And I want to thank all you wonderful, beautiful, generous, super awesome Patreon people for keeping the channel going. But we can't forget about all of you who've been watching and supporting the channel in your own special way. Contest time. This one is a very, very simple question. What are you going to be playing this weekend? Are you going to be playing the World of Warcraft, the classic beta? Are you going to play the City of Heroes private server that I need to tear myself away from, otherwise I'm never going to get any work done? Sure. Leave your answer in a comment below, and a lucky winner from the Americas region will receive a month of WoW game time that you can apply to whichever version of WoW you want, which isn't bad. I'll announce the winner next week right here on the show, and otherwise, I'm going to head out. Next week is going to be like really, really big, and my sleep schedule is going to be really, really small. I'm going to be preparing guides and whatnot for 8.2, and well, just stay tuned for that, and don't forget to subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you folks later. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay breezy.